Carl Jung and the Shadow in Anime. Only the man who goes through this darkness can hope to make any further progress. Carl Jung, Yoga and the West. The pursuit of anime is an aim to explore philosophical topics through the medium of anime, to create discussion, and to enlighten ourselves. We are by no means professionals, and the content of this podcast is pure discussion meant to stimulate and exercise our minds, and hopefully yours too. You're joined here by myself, Raven, and Teddy. What's up, Teddy?
Hello. How you doing, man?
Hey, doing great, man. Yeah, I mean, this is a great topic to kind of get into, especially after last week where we discussed kind of the meaning of death and its exploration in anime.
Oh yeah,
Um,
absolutely. I feel like this one is probably going to be very character centric as well because we're exploring, a side of a person's psyche and their character and what they don't like about themselves, essentially. So, and the thing about anime, it has a way of playing with that theme a lot, and we're gonna get into it. So
yeah, it's
yeah.
great. So let's just get into it straight away, I guess. So I guess I want to start with this quote from Carl Jung in the Red Book where he says, like plants, so men also grow, some in the light, others in the shadows. There are many who need the shadows and not the light. So basically, for anybody who doesn't know, Carl Jung was a philosopher, and he had this idea of the shadow, this concept of the shadow. Now, it's basically this idea that none of us are really as good as we like to think, right? We all possess these kind of drives, these animalistic drives for sex, power, money. We have aggressive sides. We have our attitudes. We
Can
can
I
be
just
annoying.
interject real quick?
Yeah, yeah,
Just to say he's a man after my own heart because it's something that you and I we've talked about this in the past, and we have multiple conversations. When I've told you I believe in inherent darkness in humanity.
yeah.
I believe that all of us will have a little bit of that dog in us, right? That
That
can make us
dog.
do some despicable things. So yeah, go on. Yeah, I
Hey,
just
man.
wanted to. I'm like, he's really like me for real.
Yeah, and I just had an idea actually. Oh man, we need to make a doggo meter for people. You know what I'm saying? To see
It's
who's got the most
like
dog.
how much dog does this one have in him?
Yeah.
That's
Don't
that's a,
worry.
that's a good idea.
Yeah.
Yeah, we should do a stream dedicated to that. It's like
Yeah.
the philosophy of the dog in you. Gotta find out like how much
Yeah.
dog you got.
Yeah, we're gonna definitely set that up. We're gonna, do some computer programming, set up a little meter, the doggo meter, and kind of,
Yeah.
get into this
Or
one.
we could make a tier list out of it. Be
We
like,
had a tier list
yeah,
of
yeah,
like anime characters. Who's got that dog?
yeah, that
Yeah,
would be, dude. That's yeah. I'm just imagining how much fun we're gonna have to with that. But yeah,
yeah, that's exciting.
good
That's
idea.
exciting. But yeah, but anyways, so like we all have like this aggressive side to us, and it's not just aggression. It can be anything: greed, envy. Those times when you basically, when you're like a like when you kind of get the zoomies. You know how dogs get the zoomies. Humans can get the zoomies too, and they, when people start
Yeah,
getting annoying, like they just start talking too much, or they start doing too much of one thing. They start
and
like
I
touching
want
you
to
too
ask you
much.
something too. I want to
Yeah,
ask you something. Do you think because I personally don't think that it's a clear cut type of um concept because the way I see it, we can say, for example, greed or lust are part of the shadow of an individual, right? But I
yeah,
think it's subjective depending on if they look at it as negative,
yeah.
if that makes sense. Where you can say objectively this and that is negative because it affects your mind or the people around you in a negative way. But if you look at it in terms of this is what works for me. Maybe somebody's greed is what got them to be as successful as they became. So maybe for them, their shadow is something else, not greed, right? It might be, I
Yeah,
don't like,
yeah, and that
yeah,
goes into the definition just to like kind of wrap it up real quick. So we all have these kind of attributes to us, right?
yeah,
And so for example, aggression, right?
mhm,
We all have a side that kind of can cause harm. And typically we tend to deny this, or
yes,
generally we tend to deny our flaws and our weaknesses, and we start to repress them. But the thing is, the fact of life is that what we deny does not disappear. What it instead does is it sinks. It basically sinks into our unconscious, and it congregates into what Carl Jung described as the shadow. So basically, it goes into what you're saying. Like, it maybe greed was is at the surface of your personality, and you're able to control this kind of greed. You're like Mr. Krabs, right? Where greed is a facet of your life, but not a detriment.
Hmm.
But let's say like kindness, which is a good, typically a good quality,
Yes.
is repressed in you. It's hard for you to really be kind, and so that has cost you, um, in life in some way. So it goes into this idea that the shadow may not necessarily be, I guess, conventionally bad qualities or attributes, but more so those attributes which you have repressed over time, and which you see as a detriment and which you see as negative.
Yeah, because that's a very good example because you can a lot of times people consider kindness to be weakness, right? So maybe if you grew up in an environment where you saw it as detrimental, it's possible that you repress that even though you're naturally kind-hearted. You yeah, like you said, it may be part of your
Think
shadow
about
where
think about
okay.
Orihime in Bleach.
Yeah.
Incredibly kind. And there's so many characters like that that are just incredibly kind, and it's a detriment to them because they are in a world where, for example, Orihime, she's in a world where kindness doesn't really solve much. You're not going to beat Aizen through kindness. Um, and so she finds herself most of the time as a damsel in distress and in some unfavorable situation because of this.
But you know what though?
Yeah,
She still retains it to a fault. Because remember, even when she gets captured by Aizen and everything, she still treats them with kindness,
yeah,
regardless of the situation that she's in. The one thing that I would say about Orihime that was a great depiction of how somebody's shadow can come back and haunt them is she has trauma with holos, right? Because
yeah,
she got attacked by yeah. And you remember back during the fight between Ichigo and Grimmjow, what happened where she wasn't able to really, cheer on Ichigo or support him because that fear that she has in her, it was still there. Like she was trying to repress it, but every time she saw Ichigo's mask, it reminded her of it. And it took, little baby Nail to basically make her come back to her senses, be like, listen, this man is out here fighting for you and you're acting scared. And it's like there are situations where you're forced to face your shadow, confront it, and then decide, am I going to overcome this or is this going to overcome me? And I feel like there's so many examples in anime where it's one or the other that happens. In this instance, right, she overcame it because she was like, I know this is a part of me that I don't like because it's preventing me from properly supporting Ichigo and cheering him on. And she had to bring that out of her and be like, listen, this is not going to overcome me, right? But
yeah.
yeah, like you have other times when that's not the case.
Yeah, and it goes even deeper into the Fullbring arc, where um, basically it's revealed that since Ichigo lost his powers, Orihime had been developing a power of her own, right? And so
Mhm.
she basically, for lack of a better word, she pulled out some of that dog in her, and she basically learned to kind of reflect attacks. And that was a good instance of kind of her, I guess, integrating her shadow into the light, where before, her kindness allowed her to only heal and to only shield and protect. And but because she had this intense desire to protect Ichigo, her basically, I mean, she even said it. I can't remember the quote exactly, but she basically said, "Listen, if I have to hurt somebody to protect Ichigo, that's what I'm going to do." And that's what she was able to do. Now,
Mm.
this doesn't mean that she's this. incredibly competent fighter in Bleach automatically, but it was a good instance of her integrating her shadow at the very least.
Yeah, it's interesting too because you have Ichigo, he does it all the time.
He
With
does it, yeah,
the hollowification, every time is like because we know this by now, but he's driven by a sense of duty to protect his loved ones and his town. And he's got that mindset of if I need to embrace my darkness to make this happen, this is what I will do. And he does it on a consistent basis, almost to a fault. Where against Okiora, this man he kind of went a little crazy with that Vastalord transformation because that's like full on darkness. There's nothing else but darkness at that point.
yeah. And even in Naruto, that happened with Naruto versus Pain, where he sees something happen in front of him when Hinata ends up being quote unquote killed by Pain, and he becomes filled with rage, all the rage that he's had pent up from all the bad things that have happened in his life. I'm
Mhm.
sure he had to pull from that, and he just exploded, and we saw the results of that explosion. It was just destructive to the whole village and to himself. And so there's this concept of the shadow, since it has these quote unquote negative qualities, what we perceive as negative and detrimental, right? The If we don't gain control of the shadow, there's always a risk of it snapping within us, taking over. And what happens then if we're not able to control it, right? So think about it like this, right? In a physical sense. Let's say you and I don't know if you know any people like this, but I know some people like this that they own a dog, like a very big dog,
Mhm.
right? This family owns a very big dog, and they rarely take the dog out. They typically only take the dog out at nights because the dog is very aggressive around other people and other dogs. It's not aggressive within the family and the people it knows, but the dog is very aggressive when it comes to just
Stranger.
random people.
Yeah,
And they make no effort to take control of the situation and kind of train their dog.
they just work around it.
They just work around it. But what happens if the dog somehow gets let loose? Who let the dogs out? You know what I'm saying? Who let the dogs out?
Woof. Yeah, I know.
And they have no control of the situation because they never spent any time training or cultivating, I guess, a leadership role with the dog. So it's
Oh, I
kind
see what you're doing there.
and there's this quote in Bleach where basically um White Ichigo or Zangetsu tells Ichigo, like, basically, listen, the sword is kind of like it's like a horse in the night, right? Now you can either be the horse or the knight. Now I'm paraphrasing like big time, but that's basically what he's saying. You can either dominate or be dominated by this shadow. And it's the same thing with that kind of crazy rabid dog. You can either dominate that dog or you can be dominated by it.
Or, and this is the
Or
third option, you can embrace it and become one with it.
yeah, integrate it, which is what Carl Jung was saying that we should strive towards and kind of exercise.
I don't think we should do that.
You don't think that
But-
we should integrate it?
Well, because when you integrate your, because mind you, your darkness, right? The part of you that you try to repress, that like embracing it would work if it's something that would work in your favor and in the favor of people around you. But let's say, right, that you know yourself to be extremely greedy. If you embrace that, you know what that means? It means that you're ready, willing, and able to screw over anybody and everybody around you just to achieve the most possessions. And if we're talking in a sense of anime, when the reason why I was like, I don't think we want to do that, even though that is an option available to you. But our homeboy, arguably the most beautiful man in existence when it comes to anime, Griffiths. That is exactly what he did when he got pushed to the absolute brink, and with the behelit, he embraced that shadow, right? He embraced the darkness, and we saw what became of him. He's a completely depraved individual or entity, but at the same time, it's controlled. It's what he wants. So he's able to manage it flawlessly, but this is not necessarily something we want to aspire to do, right? So I think unfortunately it's better to try to get a hold of it and control it that way instead of embracing it. Because when you embrace it, then that's when you welcome absolute chaos. And
Yeah.
that, I mean, I like the image that you use for the thumbnail for this one because I feel like that guy right there, he's a depiction of what happens when you embrace that stuff.
Yeah. Let me actually show this because this is a great juxtaposition of what we're talking about. Just kind of a little image. So when you search up Gon from Hunter x Hunter, look
Yes.
at all that you see. Smiles, big smiles, smile, smile, smile. Look at this picture right here.
Mm.
It's just a clear kind of depiction. You go from
Unadulterated rage.
you go from a big bright smile to just pure rage and just darkness and just like it's literally like a shadow, literally a pure shadow. And this is exactly what you don't want to happen.
No. Yeah, you see that like right there, like up there. You see that when his aura is going crazy.
Yeah,
Go back down a little bit. At the far right.
the far right.
Yeah, this one right there. Yeah, yeah, yeah. That you see that the look in his eyes is completely devoid of life. Like
Yeah,
that's those are the eyes of a boy with a single purpose, and that's to hurt whoever hurt him and his loved ones, and that is absolutely depraved. And this is one thing. One of the reasons why I always praise. Oh yeah, this is haunting. That image is haunting. To this day, right? I'm just gonna go off on a quick tangent here. To this day, this is the best depiction of absolute rage in anime. In my personal
yeah,
opinion, I haven't had anything besides maybe like Ichigo going Vasalord and there's a few things here there that compare, but to me, this was when somebody decided I am so unbelievably angry. I'm going to let the darkness consume me completely because I just, I'm at my wit's end. There's nothing else left. And he says as much when he's going through that transformation. He's like, there's nothing left for me to do because I tried to correct my wrong and it hasn't happened. And mind you, this so it's easy to look at this moment and think, oh, it's just he's just mad, right?
yeah,
It's not just that. There's another aspect of his shadow that he's been forced to face before then. When Pito comes into the picture and takes off Kite's arm and they have to run away, that was one of his first moments being face to face with this shadow, which was that he had to acknowledge that he was weak and he hated it.
yeah,
Right, that was the first because mind you, up until that point in previous arcs, yes, he was not the strongest, but he was able to get by either through a stroke of luck or just his innate a innate talent as a fighter. But at that point, that was the first time that he was completely overwhelmed, and there was absolutely nothing he could do, and he had to eat that essentially, and he faced it, and he's like, okay, well, this is where I'm at now. Is what to do. And then when he saw what happened to Kite, it just compiled on top of it. And I just love the foreshadowing with Kite when he's like, he's good now when everything is going well. But what will happen when he has to face that inherent darkness he has in him, which is interesting because he saw it, but a lot of people didn't. Because they're like, you're too pure of heart, and people like you are very susceptible to giving into to their shadow or to their darkness. As
yeah.
same with Griffiths a little bit in that aspect.
Oh, for sure. That almost brings me to a quote. But before I get into that, I want to kind of bring an example of somebody I think that actually has a well integrated shadow, especially towards the back end of the series, right? Huh?
No, go ahead, go ahead. My fault.
What?
My fault. I got
I'm
overexcited. Go ahead.
I'm thinking about Killua
That's what I said. That's what I said. I was like, "Are you talking about Killua?" But I
because
was too excited to. I said it
yeah.
funny. But yeah, go ahead.
So this is the thing, man. Killua, listen, you see him riding on his skateboard, you see him happy go lucky with Gon, right?
Yes.
But when he has to turn on the shadow, when he has to bring out the assassin and stop being the happy go lucky kid, he will do it. And you saw this in the tournament when he pulled up on this guy who was causing all sorts of problems.
Yeah, it
And
was
he was on that rah rah type mode, and Killua, showed him what it really do. He pulled up in the room and he said, "Listen, you move, you die. You speak, you die. You do anything that I tell you not to do, and you die. You're gonna stay very far away from Gon and very far away from me. And if you ever show your face to us again, you will die. There is only one option for you: either leave, go very far away, or die." And that was such an awesome moment because it just showed like what he's capable of and how calm, cool, and collected he is with his own shadow. And of
abs-
course, he's still a kid, so he has moments where he kind of erupts
but
and
that
explodes,
that makes sense.
but
Like
it
that,
makes sense.
yeah, for a
And
kid.
we all will do it,
Yeah,
like this is the thing, you're never gonna have like this 100%
perfectly
full
composed at all
control.
times. No,
Yeah.
it's not realistic.
Yeah, it's just something to strive towards, having control of the shadow, and Killer was just such a great example of it. Look at Kurapika, right? Kurapika, I think
Oh
he
God,
is
sheesh.
in the middle of like Gon and Killua, where Kurapika is very, very calm, cool, and collected, but there are moments where
Just
he will
don't bring
make a
around him, bro.
yeah. Yeah, don't bring the Phantom Troop around him because then he may start to make some dumb decisions.
If I'm correct, I don't think it's even just a phantom troop. I think when he sees a spider, he goes off like
Yeah,
a
the
spider.
spider,
Yeah,
yeah. Any spider, yeah.
yeah. But yeah, no, I agree with you 100%. I feel like Killua is the ideal depiction of a character that's well balanced when it comes to dealing with their darkness and their shadow, and that made me think about Bane, from Batman.
Yeah.
When he talks to Batman, it's like, "You've merely adopted the darkness. I was born in it." I'm like, listen, yeah, that's Killua. He was born in it, and so he understands how to manage it. Where gone, he's a bright ray of sunshine, and Killua even said as much. He's like, "You're my ray of sunshine."
Yeah.
Right? So it's like when you shine so bright, you also cast a very big shadow now, don't you?
Oh
So
yeah. Ooh.
so it's like you're doing all this, but on the back end is when things go south, you're going to go off. And it's the same thing with the Uchihas in Naruto, where they were known as being some of the most loving people, but because they love so hard is when they're hurt, yeah, it doesn't go so
Man,
well with people around them now, does it?
Teddy, there's so many instances of it in anime. Like I didn't
Oh,
even think
God.
about the Uchiha, but now that you mention it, like they're just a perfect example of it as well.
I know,
And
right?
how do you feel about the stoic characters that kind of they seem to kind of repress their kind of happy mood or kind mood? People like Jotaro, people like Byakuya in
Oh,
Bleach. The very stoic people who, like for example, Jotaro, right? Jojo in JoJo's Bizarre Adventure.
hmm
His relationship with Jolene, his daughter, kind of suffered for many, many years, and it wasn't until the end, basically near death, that he was able to kind of she was able to realize his form of kindness, right?
His form of affection in his
Yeah,
own. Yeah.
his form of protection, because I mean, Jotaro is the type of dude, he will call his own mother, useless, or a slur. He'll just call her, he'll treat her like garbage. But if you even come close to hurting his mom, he will travel the world and go to the
He
depths of
literally
hell, which is what he did.
he
Like he
literally
literally,
did that.
like like look, when I first saw listen, this is gonna be a quick tangent. When I first saw Jotaro, I hated him. I was ready to drop JoJo. I was like, bro, You cannot go from like the most likable main character to go to this complete asshole. He's in jail. He gets locked up as a delinquent. He's like a 14-year-old boy, even though he's more jacked than Arnold Schwarzenegger in his prime.
Dude.
And his mom just goes to see him in prison. She's worried about him. Like, if I was in prison, I would hope that my mom comes to see me.
Yeah.
And this man, when he sees his mom, he's like, "Get out of here, you worthless bitch." And I'm just like, bro, what the hell is this guy on right now? I hate this guy. I do not like, there's no way you can make me like this guy. But then what happens is his mom basically gets infected by the Dio kind of stand curse thing. And
Yeah.
he has to find Dio. And he has to fight Dio, this kind of like godlike mountain of a man.
One of the best villains of all time, but yeah,
E-
continue.
Exactly. And he had a great integrated shadow, man. He was able to kind of do it all. But anyways, him and Aizen. But anyways, Jotaro, when he sees his mom in dire need, he turns off that kind of delinquent bad boy attitude, and he's able to kind of harness that and put that towards um saving his mom.
You know what's interesting about Jotaro? It's funny
Yeah.
because you said the moment you saw him, you hated him.
Yeah.
Was the same for me. And then the very next minute, I ended up loving him
Yeah.
because you find out he locked himself up because he thought he was a danger to the people around him. And
Yeah.
he talking to his mom that way was his way of protecting her. It's like, if I'm harsh like you, like that, you won't want to be around me, which is exactly what I want because I'm dangerous right now. There's
Yeah.
something happening to me and I can't make sense of it. It's not until like Abdul and Joseph pulled up. It's like, nah, son, this is what's happening to you. Now come with us. We got work to do. So I went from the very first second hitting him, and then instantly I'm like, yeah, he's my guy. He's that
Yeah.
guy because he has, yes, he's a little bit awkward about how he shows his affection, but he cares. Like he will tell his mom, "Hey, stop being annoying and go lay down."
Yeah.
That's his way of showing, like, I care for your well-being. You look exhausted. Please go take a nap. But he won't say it like that though. He'll be like, just get out of my sight. Go lay down or something. Like,
Yeah.
And it's funny because when you see his mom, she always smiles because she gets him. That's her son. She
She
understands
gets him. Yeah. She knows.
how he is, right? But that's why it's always funny to me when I see people that say, "Oh, they absolutely despise Jotaro because of how." I'm like, you're missing the point
Nah. Yeah.
entirely,
They missed the point.
you know. But he's my
They
favorite.
missed the point. You like, I understand if you hate Jotaro like the first time you see him, like a few episodes, but after a while you just kind of, the whole picture kind of starts to sink in your mind, and you kind of realize like who he really is.
Who he
Like
really is.
when he had that call with his grandma, and he said, "Listen, you're calling right now because you're worried. Don't worry about the old man, because I'm with him right now."
You
Like,
see,
bro, that was one of the most biggest boss moments ever. Like, he was basically telling him,
he's a
"Listen,
family man. They don't realize this.
he's a family man." He's like, "Listen, you don't even have to worry. Don't call again because I'm with him. Like, I'm gonna take care of everything." Like, listen, bro, the people aren't ready for this. But let me get this quote up because
Uh,
I've been excited to
I'm
say
about
this for a while.
yeah, yeah, go ahead, go ahead.
So, in Civilization in Transition, Carl Jung says, "The shadow belongs to the wholeness of the personality. The strong man must somewhere be weak. Somewhere, the clever man must be stupid. Otherwise, he is too good to be true and falls back on pose and bluff. Is it not an old truth that woman loves the weaknesses of the strong man more than his actual strength, and the stupidity of the clever man more than his cleverness? Her love wants the whole man." So this kind of just goes into what we're saying as a whole, where like Gon, right? For example, he was very strong in his world,
Mhm.
but where the strong man is strong, he must also be weak somewhere in some facet, and it's in that weakness that he must have a control and an understanding. And if he doesn't have some facet or some kind of mode of control, then he may risk one day losing himself in this weakness, and I mean that's what we saw happening to Gon. He literally completely lost himself. He lost
But
his Nen to this weakness.
he abandoned himself to it.
Yeah,
And but that's the thing is, you know, at that particular point in time, he saw it as worth it.
yeah, he
Yeah.
saw it as worth it.
Yeah, so that's why he did that. And that's the thing that I've noticed a lot in anime where a lot of the time it's when they're faced with great adversity or challenges that or hardships that some characters they're forced to face their shadow or their darkness and they're forced to admit to it. There are many instances of it in One Piece, right? Which is one of our favorite stories of all time. But
Well,
the
yeah.
one example that I wanted to mention real quick, which might not necessarily stand out to a lot of people because it's a character who doesn't really get mentioned all that much, is Fisher Tiger. Do you remember Fisher Tiger?
Ooh, Fisher Tiger, let's go.
Yes. He liberated a bunch of slaves from Marijua, and he tried
The
to,
goat.
yeah, like he tried to look for the good in in human beings, in mankind. But when he returned that little slave girl, Koala, which, by the way, great work on Oda to bring her back around to be part of the revolutionaries. That was one of those moments like, yeah, he's cooking for real. But when he brought back Koala back to her town, you'd think that these people would be grateful to him for what he did. Instead, they start shooting him down because he's a fisherman and they fear fishermen for whatever obscure reason. Part of it's probably the manipulation from the government to divide and conquer, essentially, where they make you look at other races as freaks, right?
Yeah,
But do you remember after he narrowly escaped with his life, which is extremely narrowly because he ends up dying from it? He was on the ship leaving that place, and they figured that there were some humans that whose blood they could take to transfuse him to help him survive. This man chose death over blood of humans in him because he's like he faced his darkness and he wasn't able to overcome it, but he acknowledged it. To me, that was one of the most powerful moments in the story because he showed you that his hatred was so deep seated that even when he tried, at the end of the day, just couldn't bring himself to be better. But he wanted better for his people, so he
yeah,
told them, he was like, I can't stand humans. I've tried to love them, but I can't. Like the way they just treated me when I brought back their little human girl, I can't believe this, right? And it's such a visceral and powerful moment because you can understand where he's coming from because you've seen how they've been treated, you've seen what they've been through, so you understand why he has that darkness in him. And the fact that imagine the just take a minute, right, to picture the strength of conviction you need to have to where you're choosing death over compromising your beliefs and your values. That's powerful, you know. And in this case you could say because he saw it as a negative that he hated the humans so much. To me though, I look at it as a strength of character. That goes back to what I was, telling you earlier, that I feel like the concept of shadow is in the darkness. It's so subjective based on what you consider to be negative in
yeah,
your, or what you consider to be something you don't want to acknowledge yourself or you don't want other people to see. And for him, he didn't want other people to see that he hated because he was trying to make himself to be an example for his fellow fishermen. So he couldn't show that, and he repressed it all the way until the very end where it became too much. So I feel he's one of the most like thematically powerful characters in One Piece. And
yeah.
when I saw this theme that we're going to talk about today, I was like, I gotta mention him because he's
I'm
a
glad that you did. I'm glad that you mentioned it because this is actually one of the biggest, like, underrated moments that stuck with me in One Piece, right?
Mhm.
And it goes back to the kind of quote where it says, "The strong man must somewhere be weak," right? And
Yeah.
so in Fisher Tiger, he was a very righteous and virtuous man. and in somewhere in the righteous man there must be an unrighteous man, and somewhere in the virtuous man there must be a lack of virtue somewhere, right? So he was a man that always wanted to liberate and unite people, and in the end, ultimately, he rejected this, um, the people because of the experiences that he had, and I understand why he did completely. And when I first watched that scene, actually, not in a bad way in terms of the story, right? But in
Mhm.
some facet in myself, I was a little disappointed in him. I was like, man, like, no, don't do this, bro. Just don't do this. And you know, I just was disappointed. I think that the story choice was amazing, right? It was great to kind of see that depth of character. But in that moment when I saw his shadow, I saw his weakness, and I felt a bit of a disappointment in Fisher Tiger. And so it kind of brings me to this other question I wanted to ask you, Teddy. Um,
It was a
and just like just to talk about it in general. Um, let me kind of set it up because it's kind of a like a different route that I want to take with this. So, cancel culture exists.
I love it with all my heart. Yes, I
Yeah.
know it.
And I'm not talking about like crimes. I'm not talking about like people who've committed crimes and then been, shunned by society. I'm talking about maybe people who online have shown maybe a not so virtuous side of themselves and have been completely chastised by it. Not by it, but for it. Uh, do you think that cancel culture further promotes the repression of one's shadow? So it's
I
kind
think
of like negative.
I think it expands it. Because what happens with cancel culture is that sometimes if you have an opinion or like a mindset that's considered to be detrimental to society as a whole, you get shamed for it. So what ends up happening is that aspects of your personality or your character that you didn't necessarily consider to be a problem or problematic, they become so. And so it becomes part of your shadow or your darkness, where you repress it as much as possible because you realize that you're living in times where that opinion is not necessarily welcome, right? And and so I think what it does is just it represses people on a much larger scale than before.
Yeah. So
And
less on an individual level and more on like a kind of as a whole, a majority.
yeah, yeah. And I just don't think that's a productive way to be, because something that I've realized about cancel culture or noticed about cancel culture, a lot of it can be extremely shallow at times, where you're basically censoring people's um points of views or opinions because you don't like them. We notice it especially with uh stand-up comedy recently, where all of a sudden jokes that were fine to make just a couple years ago now are taboo, which doesn't make any sense because it's within a context of telling jokes.
Yeah.
You're not supposed to be taking it seriously, but people just getting into in their feelings and they can't laugh about things, and so it becomes a problem. And now you have to add to a list of things that you already didn't, like, you already had, that you didn't want other people to see, for instance, or you didn't want to acknowledge it yourself, and you repress it as much as possible. Like, I'm I'm not sure I want to mention this example because I feel like that's a whole can of worms that might lead down a road that's a little bit, thorny, a little thorny path right there. But it's like, um the whole thing about um the and I'm going to be very quick about it, okay? Because I don't want it to take over. This is very good time we're having with this particular topic, but
Yeah, yeah, for sure.
the transgender issue, right? I feel like everybody has opinions on it one way or another, but what's happening is currently because acceptance is being pushed to the forefront. There are certain opinions that just aren't welcome. But the problem is, it's not, people think that those opinions mean that you're not accepting of transgender people, but that's not it. Right. But that's the way it gets interpreted. And so what ends up happening is a lot of the time you have those thoughts, but you have to repress them because it's not what's commonly accepted at the time. In fact, you'll be shunned for mentioning that you have certain views and certain opinions. And so, yeah, that kind of goes into what you were talking about. Like it just
Yeah.
makes life more difficult than it really needs to be, in my opinion.
Yeah, that's true. I mean, the thing is that I feel like society today is kind of at a crossroads in the way that we understand each other. Where there's a lot of people who don't understand trans people, and
Hmm.
people who don't subscribe to, I guess, the traditional gender norm. People who are gender fluid, or people who may have a different sexuality, or just all types of different walks of life. People just maybe not understand it. um More so, like, right leaning or conservative people may not understand these left leaning or more liberal ideologies, right?
Hmm.
And but the thing is, like, sometimes in order to understand somebody, um that's when the shadow will come out. I'm maybe not wording that correctly, but sometimes in order to understand somebody, you have to understand their shadow. And that can definitely lead to some, I guess, uncomfortable conversations with people, because, of course, just like we're talking about with the shadow, like, not everybody is perfect. Not everybody's going to be understanding. Where there is the understanding man, there will be also the closed-minded man or woman. So that's just the way that it is. That's just the way that humanity is set up, where we are light as much as we are darkness. That's the way I see it. Um,
Yeah.
And yeah, this is the type of conversations we want to have. We don't want to shy away from. Um, I feel like it's definitely beneficial to kind of bring these things to light and talk about them in depth.
No, I
And
agree. I agree. 100%.
yeah, like, I know, like, I just even want to get into it just personally. Like, there's things in my life that, like, traits of myself that I have definitely repressed, right? Just because of work, um, or just experiences in life, and they can be a detriment. They can be a detriment if I just keep repressing them. But if I learn to hone them, I can gain a great benefit from them. For example, I'm sure you guys have heard this before, or Teddy, you've heard this, I'm sure, because you go to the gym a lot, and I go to the gym too. And people say, "Listen, some crap just happened to me. I'm gonna go to the gym and channel that in the gym. I'm gonna use that rage that I have and hit the heavy bag." Like, have you heard that before, Teddy?
Yeah, use your rage in a productive way. Absolutely.
Yeah, exactly. So that's what, like, one of the most simple ways you can do it, really.
Yeah. I mean, for
Or for
me,
example,
I go ahead.
just real quick, for example, people who, I'm sure you've seen people who are very controlling, like maybe
Hmm.
like a manager type, who they always have something to say. They always want to be in control. They always want things their way. Um, One way they can channel that is, like, the way that they handle their home, cleaning it, the way they organize it, like the cooking and everything, that they can channel it that way, or organizing events, things like that. What were you going to say?
Yeah, no, I was gonna say, like, for me, I know for a fact that one trait that I had growing up is laziness, where it's weird because I like to do things the proper way, but I also can be very lazy just by nature, right? And so it's one instance where I've had to repress that as much as possible because there are times when, see, so it's there's facets to it. Is a way that you can use it to your advantage, but then there are other ways where it's just detrimental and you have to shove it deep down as much as possible. For some of us who are in more physically labor intensive type of line of work, you can't afford to be lazy. You just have to overcome that and do what you need to do, right? But then when you're thinking of what's the most efficient way to do something, the less resource intensive way of doing something, that's when you can use your laziness to your advantage, because it makes you think harder to find better ways to do certain things, right? So it just really depends on the situation and how you choose to use it. And for me, it's been a balancing act to this day, where it's like, okay, do I just be lazy here and try to find the most efficient way of doing this, or do I have to just suck it up and put my back into it, so to speak? Right. So it's really it's on a spectrum, really. But
Yeah. And I mean, it goes back to the quote that like plants, so men also grow. Some in the light, others in the shadows. There are many who need the shadows and not the light. And I mean, I definitely feel that in my life, that where the times that I've felt the most growth in my life have been when the shadow has been a bit more present than the light.
mhm,
That's just for me. Like when the chips are down, when I don't feel good, when I feel irritable, and when I feel anxious, get filled with anxiety about situations. Somehow, even though it feels like crap, the best is brought out of me. And I know a lot of people that feel that way. A great example of this in real life is like Mike Tyson, right? Where he came from a really, really bad background, and you saw what he was able to reach, and he did that kind of in spite of that, despite that. And there's just tons of examples of that, like even I guess Michael Jackson was one that comes to mind as well. Abusive household, from what I can remember. Crazy, crazy, and work ethic was born from that, you know? So
that's
there's just a lot going on.
because when you mentioned that Michael Jackson comment, that reminds me of another character that I know. It comes from a series that you love, you hold near and dear to your heart.
Which is that?
My hero.
Oh, here we go.
I know you love that series so much, but there's a particular character in there, Todoroki Shoto, half heart, half eyes, right?
Nice.
Where he had the similar treatment because his dad saw the potential in him, because he was the perfect balance between heat and cold, and he put him through some grueling training growing up so that he could live up to his ambitions and his dreams. And what that ended up doing for Shoto was create that darkness in him when he saw how he treated their mom, right? To the point where now when she looked at him and she looked at the hot side of him, she freaked out, and that's how he got his burn scar on his face, right?
Yeah.
So he has a permanent reminder on his face of that darkness that he grew up in because of his dad, right? And what that ended up doing is it turned it into an obsession, where now he's decided that as a hero, he's only ever going to use the eyesight, because he's trying to rebuke his father by doing that and rejecting him and everything that he believes in, right? And it wasn't until that fight with Deku that he was made to face that darkness through Deku's words, telling him like, "Listen, this is your life. You can't be letting somebody else's nonsense dictate your life. It's at the end of the day, regardless of how it came about, this is your ability, and you have every right to use it. That shouldn't be like, you shouldn't look at it as you validating somebody just because you're using your ability." And that, to me, that was a moment where it's like, he basically overcame that darkness in that particular moment with Deku's help, right? Because he's like, okay, I see that this is not this is not what I thought it was, right? Like I thought it was all about my dad and rebuking him, but this is more so about me and my goals and what I want to do with my life, right? Like I want to be a hero, and for me to do that, I need to use all the tools at my disposal to get there because you know for a fact that everybody else is, right? So it was, to me, that was peak by hero. I think I can't think of any point in time after this that uh my hero reached that kind of height in terms of, the just how impactful the moment was, right? And just how quintessential shonen almost he felt. And then with the clash at the end, everything, it was a beautiful moment. But it's ironic to me, right, that the one guy who brought that darkness out of him and made him face it is the same guy who struggles with it himself, because
Yeah.
is one of the worst examples of somebody who has, first of all,
He's got no dog.
he he has zero dog in him. Listen, if he were to do this tier list, he'd be like in the F range if we even have that,
Yeah.
or the Deku range. You have his own tier. But the reason I said this is because his main source of darkness was the fact that he was quirkless, right? And that's what he struggled with. And then when he got given a quirk, he just never learned to properly use. Even after everything that he's been through, he still finds himself in situations where he's destroying his limbs every single time. And like, when will you acknowledge the fact that you're not as efficient and clever with this quirk as you think you are?
Yeah.
And it feels like he never learns from his lessons. You
I
remember?
feel like
Yeah,
I
yeah,
feel like they're trying to do a Spider-Man. They tried to do a Spider-Man thing, but they failed. Where like Deku is basically supposed to be, well, he was supposed to be quirkless, right?
yeah.
So his thing is that he studied so many quirks and he knows so much about the ins
Like
and outs of quirks
resort.
that
That's
once
the idea.
yeah, once he gets a quirk, he'll be able to actually, be very resourceful with it because he spent so much time thinking about it. But that just isn't the case as to what happened. Whereas Spider-Man, he was very smart, lived his life without powers as a complete nerd and a loser. But this kind of shadow, this undesirable side to him, proved beneficial because when he actually got the spider powers, he was able to make gadgets to kind of enhance his abilities,
Hmm.
and he was able to use his abilities in very creative ways because of the intellect that he gained from being a bookworm the whole time. So there's good and bad examples of it, and I mean I feel like in My Hero there's another character that's kind of like Killua and also like Shanks too. I feel like Shanks is as a well integrated shadow from what we've seen so far, where he's a very nice guy, but he's able to pull out that kind of dark side. And that dog, we saw that very recently against Kid. Um,
Oh, he packed that boy up. Yeah.
yeah, I feel like All Might in his prime had the had probably a pretty good, down pat control of his shadow. Even very recently, Deku, he went basically full shadow mode and he was like a rogue when he fought Lady Nagant.
That's one thing that I'm actually kind of surprised about, that because I thought it was going to be the route where he's completely consumed by it, and he's in full vigilante mode and he doesn't care about, what he needs to do to get to. No, but he's still at his core, that kindness to him, even in his dealings while being in that mode. So
Yeah,
definitely interesting to note.
he had a control of it, but I feel not enough control because obviously it was a detriment because it was on the basis of him having zero kind of interactions with the people that he loved. and zero friendship, zero relationship, zero attachment, zero like, and that is obviously negative. That's not good.
Like he
And
wasn't able to really balance it. He just kind
yeah.
of did
So what
that.
did he do? He repressed that kind quality too much. That's the way that I saw it.
Yeah, he sacrificed for for the mode that he's currently in,
Yeah.
which is actually a beautiful segue because there was one other thing I wanted to well, not one other thing, it's like one thing I wanted to mention when we talk about repressed darkness is Full Metal Alchemist.
Oh yes, let's go.
And it's interesting because Ed and Al are like, how some people, like, we're talking here about how you're able to repress your shadow.
Yeah.
They are living with the result of them, you know giving into that shadow, because the grief that they had over losing their mom was so deep that they tried to revive her through alchemy, right? They try to bring her back. What did that do? That made Ed lose an arm and a leg, literally. And Alphonse, he lost his entire body. So they're going through life until the very end of the story, right? They're going through life with a constant reminder of what giving into their shadow did to them. And I think that was this one thing that I was really it really stood out to me when we're about to talk about this topic. I was like, at least a lot of us, we get to repress it. They have to live with it, a reminder of it on a regular basis. That, just imagine you having to do that. That would be that would be a lesson learned if I ever seen one.
Yeah.
It's like, imagine, and that's why, like, even in real life, you say there's some punishments that you get for giving to your shadow. You know that there's some places in the world where, let's say, if you are greedy and you try to steal something, whichever hand you use to try to steal, they'll chop it off. So you get a constant reminder that this is what you brought upon yourself by indulging into your shadow. That's crazy, right?
Yeah.
To see that in an anime like Full Metal, I was like, that is, that's real. That's real. We don't see it as often in our world, but it's something that actually happens.
Yeah. I mean, this is the thing, Teddy. As you're talking, and my mind is kind of opening up to this kind of overarching idea. As
Mm.
we're talking, you notice that most of the examples when we're talking about the shadow, they're of shonen.
Yeah.
And the thing is, what is shonen? To me, shonen is the hero's journey. And I feel like the shadow was very, very much tied to the hero's journey. Where I don't know if you ever felt this. You go into a movie or you go into like an anime, like a shonen anime,
Hmm.
and you start it off, and the character, they are a nerd. They suck. They're a loser. But once you get to that last episode, they're much more composed. They're accomplished. You feel like they have a. You feel like they're just almost like they're the same person, but they're just leveled up. You know
Hmm.
what I'm saying? So I feel like the shadow is very much a part of the hero's journey, and that's why it resonates so much. That's why shonen resonates so much with this. I feel because we, in a sense, are on the hero's journey, all of us in our own way. As that's how I see it. So that's why I feel like shonen is such a beautiful genre. You're able to kind of really relate to it and kind of and this is the one of the things about the shadow where Carl Jung talks about how to integrate the shadow, right? And obviously, one of the ways we can do this is by starting to notice the shadow in us, right? Starting to look introspectively and look at our own qualities and kind of go from there. But another way you can do that is if you can't see your own qualities, right? Start to look at other people's qualities. Start to kind of try to notice it in other people. And I feel like shonen, in a sense, has kind of trained us because we're able to see the shadow in all of these characters and all this media that we consume. We're just seeing it constantly. That we're just like face to face with the shadow of others, and we kind of gain a skill in identifying these attributes and identifying whether they're weaknesses or whether they're actually strengths. And you know, after watching an anime or after watching a movie, you kind of feel a sense of accomplishment, a sense of inner growth from yourself as well, almost as if you learned something, right?
Mhm.
At least that's the way I felt when, especially when I was very, very young. I used to I would walk out of the movie theater and I would be like, man, that was a journey. That like I feel like I almost feel like I accomplished something, you know?
Yeah.
I don't know if you ever saw the movie Wanted with the
Too high
guns.
for you.
Like you remember the last you I mean you remember the first few minutes. The dude was getting cheated on. He was getting cucked out and he was a loser, right?
That is insane.
Um
But yeah, yeah.
and by the end of it, he's just the absolute boss. And his literally the last quote of the movie is, "What the f have you been doing lately?" You know, and like it kind of prompts you to be like, "Oh man, it's time to look at myself, bro. It's time to look at my own kind
Yeah,
of situation, circumstance, or in this case, shadow, and make the right moves to get where this guy's at."
yeah.
So
Became an absolute demon for real, for real.
yeah,
So I was thinking about something, right? Because earlier we're talking about how there's different options to dealing with shadow, which is one, you could completely repress it, two, you can try and manage and work with it, and three, you can just mesh with it completely.
yeah,
Sim- right? And so I feel like there's one guy who I guess there's one of my first instances in my time watching anime that I noticed this. Is one guy, he embraced it fully, but it was in such a controlled way that it was very divisive. I feel people were trying to decide whether or not he did the right thing or not with how he managed it. And I'm talking about Light from Death Note. Like, yeah, I
yep.
got, and you see when he found the Death Note and he decided that he was essentially going to become the god of his verse and correct the wrong, and purge the vermin in humanity. That's the way he looked at it, right? He looked at himself as a godsend, if you will. Like he saw like he had a purpose, a holy purpose of cleansing humanity of its filth and its depravity, right? Now, what do you think? Look at a beautiful face. Look at that mug. He knows what he's doing. See, that's the face of a guy who's in full control, right? He may have looked deranged to a lot of us because of his antics, and he seemed to be a little bit over the top with everything. But all the way through until he had other people working with him, he was in full control, right? So then I wanted to ask you, do you think that would you consider him a good example of how um you can mesh completely with your darkness and it being a positive?
Yeah, for sure. Like this is the thing. Like, of course, his actions were reprehensible in a sense, right? And it didn't turn out well for him. But when you're just looking at his personality
Hmm.
and who he was as a person, like how he was able to manage himself and carry himself through life, and how he was able to use this to his benefit, 100%. He had a well integrated shadow to where he was able to kind of enjoy life and seduce others and turn that this face that we're seeing right now on screen, he's able to turn it on and off very easily, for better or for worse,
That
I'd say.
so funny because you see the image right on the left, and he looks like prime and proper, like a upstanding citizen that would never do anything, problematic.
Yeah.
He's super straight laced on that picture on the left, but then you see that one, and it's like, yeah, that's the
He got
that's
that dog.
exactly. He's a menace when he needs to be. And I think, like you said, I agree 100%. I feel like he's a perfect example of how you can mesh that and make it work. Now, you could make an argument that he was a little bit extremist with it. Yes, because it got to a point where it wasn't just guilty people that he got rid of, but anybody that would get in the way of him um, fulfilling his purpose or what he perceived to be his purpose, right? And then he started to get a little bit questionable because he seemed to be going over the top, but he never killed innocent people, right? He never let the power get to his head to where he was like, okay, you know what? I can do whatever I want with this notebook. You just make the mistake of pissing me off and I kill you. I don't remember a single instance in the story where that happened. It was always either actual criminals or people who were getting close to finding him out and preventing him from doing what he was doing. But correct me if I'm wrong. I believe that's what
No,
happened.
yeah, yeah. From what
Yeah,
I
I don't.
remember too, I listen. I watched Death Note very early in my anime career, if you could call it a career. I mean, um, and yeah, that from what I remember, that is the case. That is definitely the case. And look, I wanted to kind of bring up this guy. I know you're probably gonna love this, Teddy. I think this is a guy with a great control over his shadow. Lelouch Lamperouge. You know what I'm saying?
Listen, that's my guy right there. He's one of the goated MCs of all time, in my opinion, in my very, very biased opinion. You know,
Yeah, man. This dude was a beat. I mean, you. It's literally like the thing about anime is that like it has a visual component, so it's very easy to literally see the shadow. Like, look at the way his eyes, like half,
yeah.
regular, half shadow. Like this is where you want to be. This is how you want to get right here.
Well, like half and half. Okay.
Yeah. Oh, I mean, this title isn't really the best, most flattering. Code Geass 10 ways Lelouch ruined his likability. I mean, let me let me get that out of the way. That's not really helping the point. But
We just put that to the side real quick. So what
yeah,
we're saying is, he's got that beautiful duality. All
yeah.
right, perfectly balanced. This is what you want when it comes to your shit, bro. Not,
Oh man.
not yeah, but you want to remain likable as you're doing it for the
Yeah,
least.
that's the thing. So I mean, this is the thing. I've I've always done like martial arts and things like that, right? Um
Yeah.
and hit the gym and everything. So I know how to defend myself well, right? Like I am the type of person that I do not seek violence. I do not want to get into any violent interaction. It's my philosophy that violence should only ever be the answer if impending violence is imposed upon you. So for example, if you're under attack, um, then of course you must attack back to defend yourself. But if somebody's like just saying words, they're just saying mean things, I'm not gonna punch you in the face because you called me a loser or a dummy.
Yeah.
Um,
Yeah.
that's just immature, and that's just a lack of control of your anger or rage or humiliation in my eyes. Um, but there is like kind of a dog in me, right? There is the kind of that dark side, that rage, right? So I have to control it, right?
Yeah.
Um, and that's one of the ways that I see the shadow in my life, where I feel like I have that aspect of my life integrated very well, where it's very hard to get a rise out of me, and you're only going to get that if you immediately threaten me with physical violence. Then I'll just have to defend myself, and even
So
if I'm defending myself, I won't let it get too far. I'm not going to kick you on the ground and stomp your head in until you no longer exist. I'm just going to stop you, and that's it. Typically, that's ideally what the integrated shadow I feel like would look like, at least in that instance.
so then I have this question. Do you believe that there is absolutely nothing that anyone could ever say at any point in time that will make you go off?
I mean, I don't believe that is like completely impossible,
Mhm.
but it just hasn't happened, you know? And I've been in a lot of instances like that. Like the only times that I've popped off have been when like people have literally come to me and try to physically attack me.
So
You know?
then, yeah, I have another question then.
Yeah.
Do you believe that part of that may be because of your current environment? So let me rephrase it. What I mean by that is, do you know how some people um they may be repressed because of the circumstances they're living in where they can't afford, say for example, to pop off. Like let's say for example, you work at a uh, like you work in some customer service capacity and your livelihood depends on that job, right? And
Yeah.
you everything. Usually, you know that with customer service, you get to hear a lot and see a lot and be treated in ways because the customer technically is always correct. The customer is always right, and you just have to endure everything they throw at you. Now, if you were in a position of power where you don't have to worry about the repercussions of your actions, do you think that it would make it more likely for you to pop off? Because I'm going to be honest for myself, right? I like to believe that I have enough mental fortitude that I can keep the darkness at bay in certain situations. But if I had nothing to lose, if my money was right, my life was right, I'm just, chilling, everything is good. If somebody comes to me and says certain things, knowing that I don't have to worry about any repercussions or consequences, I might swing. Not even because it's necessary, but because I feel like I can and get away with it.
Yeah. Yeah, for sure. I mean, in that situation, like the chips would be different where I'm assuming like I would be used to kind of that power already.
Mhm,
And I feel like yeah, that would definitely be the case. Like the thing is we all kind of I mean, maybe not we all, but like I definitely, get mad. There's times that like people will say things and I just don't like it. I get mad, you know?
mhm.
But my initial response is never to just like come to blows with them or anything like that. But it just is what it is. I feel like the shadow is also affected by society as well, externally, our upbringing, how we've kind of gone about life. And
You're reading my mind right now. That's exactly what I'm thinking, and you're saying it. But yeah, go ahead.
yeah, yeah, it's literally just affected by our upbringing, even the way we were raised as children.
Because that's the
um
thing I'm gonna say. It's like for me, I go through life holding a lot of respect for people around me, regardless of what their background may be, where they come from, what they've been through. I don't care. I feel like as fellow human beings, we're all deserving of a modicum of courtesy and common decency, right?
yeah,
Because I believe this, when I'm not shown that minimum courtesy or decency, it can really mess with me. I ain't gonna hold you. Because I feel like this is a standard that I have for myself that I feel like should be normal for everybody else. But the same energy doesn't get reciprocated. And at that point, we have a problem because I'm thinking this should be normal. Why are you conflicting with what I believe to be normal? At that point, it's like, I would never treat you or anybody else this way. So why do you feel that it's okay for you to do that to me? Right. And
yeah,
it's that mindset that sometimes gets to me because I'm thinking, hey, really, really shouldn't be this way,
yeah.
you know?
Okay, so let me bring a more grounded example then, I guess, for my example, right, with the fighting and with, I guess, anger, right?
Hmm.
Let's say someone's been talking a lot of crap. They've been just talking endlessly, right, about me.
Yeah.
And they want to fight. They say, "Listen, you know, you have the composure of silken tofu."
Oh no, not the soft composition. Oh,
Yeah. You are about as hard as a poached egg.
oh, that's
And
soft.
and you know, once I see you, it's over. At that point, like if I would like really wanted to fight and
It's all
just come to blows, I would just say, "Listen, okay, you want to fight? let's go to the gym. Let's go to the boxing gym and get in the ring
Do this the right way.
and let's do this the right way. So in
Got
my case, like the ideally,
yeah.
even if we have to get to that point where it's not like I'm defending myself for something, I wanted to be in a controlled environment.
Still be civilized, even if you
Yeah. Yeah,
yeah.
because the thing is, the way I look at it, there's an external thing apart from like just the shadow stuff, right? Where like the way I see fights, it can be life or death. If you're fighting out on the street
Oh
and you
yeah.
hit somebody, the back of their head falls on the concrete,
It's
you can literally pass away from that.
yes.
That is no like laughing matter. Like you can literally die from just like fighting.
And then it looks silly when you look back on it, where it's like you realize this was just like a skirmish, an altercation that ended up in somebody's death or lifetime injury or paralysis. Like you really have to think about the ramifications sometimes.
Yeah, yeah,
But I understand. I understand. I feel like that's the right approach to have. That's why I always find it unbelievably weak when people resort to guns as quickly as they do, right?
yeah,
And that's another thing too, because like we said, I I, per- I personally believe that regardless of how wholesome and upstanding you are, everybody has a little bit of darkness in them. Like think about, you've heard these stories of these pastors that preach vehemently against homosexuality, but then you find out they've been in gay orgies, right?
yeah,
Because they try to repress what they're really about, so much so that they have to indulge in it.
yeah. It's
Persons
like this. It's like this, Teddy. I feel like the shadow attaches itself not even just to humans. It also attaches itself to like intangible concepts, right? So the shadow will attach itself to wherever there's light, right? So for example, Teddy, consider this, right? Gun control in the US, right?
Yes.
Hear this statement. In order to protect ourselves as US citizens, we need guns. Guns are beneficial to every American and we have the right to bear arms. So this is the light of gun control, right? This is the light. This is the I guess the good side or the beautiful side of it, right? Where this is how a lot of people see it. But how about the shadow? Where guns results in many deaths of people, children, animals. Like it's just it wreaks havoc on the country. I mean, there's no need to go into examples. We all know what
Mhm.
examples kind of spring to
But,
mind, right?
like, yeah, absolutely.
And I feel like it just goes in the shadow is kind of really amplified with these examples. Like look at America, right?
Mhm.
When you think of this statement, America is the land of the free, the righteous. We accept all people. We're a melting pot of all types of different cultures. Then you look at the shadow of what America has been in the past: slavery, lynchings, destruction, racism, which are all things that exist. So there's like there as much as there is a duality between the shadow and light in us as individuals,
A
there
lot
is
of
there's a duality in society as well.
yeah, no, absolutely, absolutely. Like it's not just internal; it's also external, 100%. And that's the funny thing because remember, as earlier as I said that sometimes when you're faced with hardship or hard times, that's when you're made to face and interact with your shadow. The same applies with power. Whenever you're given power, you're also in that situation have to face that darkness and deal with it and decide, am I going to let it consume me or am I going to get a hold of it? Because like the example I gave you earlier of, if I'm in a situation where I feel like my life is pretty much made, I have nothing to lose, at that point I feel like I'm in a position where I can just wreak havoc as I please,
Yeah,
right? Same thing with having a gun. Do you know the amount of power a gun gives you? And
yeah,
people always make this stupid analogy when they try to uh, combat gun control, when they say it's not the gun, it's the people. When they say, oh, if you take a knife, you can kill somebody with it as well. It's like, yeah, but it is a hell of a lot easier to do that with a gun than it is with a knife. With a
yeah,
knife, you have to get up close and personal, unless you're like Hawkeye and you can throw a knife like nobody's business, which I don't think most of us are. You have to gun in up close to kill somebody with a knife. With a gun, the amount of power you have with that, you just pull the trigger and it's over.
yeah,
So at that point, when you have that in your hand, are you strong enough to face your darkness and decide not to indulge in it? Like, let's say you're in an altercation in the street where you're fighting, you're about to be in a fight with somebody and you have a gun. Are you strong enough mentally to resist the temptation of just using that gun and use your hands instead?
yeah,
Like, it's so real. So it's like, you know, you can look at it as as something that's very internal, right? But there's a lot of external factors that affect how you deal with your well, and there's definitely have to be acknowledged. And that's why I'm so mad. I'm so upset that you don't like sports anime as much as I do, because there are so many like grounded real life examples that happen in there that I feel you would appreciate. But no, mystery is above sports anime, right? So you
no,
can't.
I mean, this is the thing. I love sports anime, bro. I've seen most of, listen, just because I didn't watch Blue Lock
Bro.
does
Slam
not mean, listen, I didn't watch like one sports anime and now I don't like all of the sports
No, that's
anime.
not true. Have you watched Haikyuu?
Yes,
Oh, my fault. Hey,
bro, I've watched
that's it.
Haikyuu, Kuroko no Basket, Ace
Okay.
no Diamond,
Hey, you
Hajime no
wait.
Ippo,
Wait,
Baby Steps.
you watch yo, you watch Baby Step? Yeah,
Bro,
that's me. That's tech. I can't believe you actually watch that stuff. Oh god. Hey,
bro, I've watched all
bro.
of that.
And I came through with all the slander. My apologies, sir. I retract the statement. I came hot. I'm like, yo, I know I don't watch sports anime. I'm this one. And dude, my fault. So then you know about Shoyo Hinata, right?
Yeah,
Yeah. And to me,
bro.
he's like a great example of somebody who was able to face their darkness, because for him, right? Something that he kept struggling with was the fact that he lacked technical understanding of the game of volleyball. All he relied on was his reflexes and his jumping ability.
Yeah,
The longest time, I think through seasons 1 and 2, it carried him through. But then he had to face his demons when it came a time where they were trying to train for the nationals, and everybody would get selected to go through this to those special camps to train, and he didn't get selected. And the reason why was because he was told blatantly, you lack any understanding of how the game of volleyball is played. Up until now, you've been carried by a strong team that brings out your greatest assets, your strengths. But without them, you're nothing. On your own, you're nothing. And he's had to eat that and face it and humble himself. Where throughout much of season 3, he's just learning. He's a ball boy collecting the balls, the stray balls for.
yeah, yeah, yeah. I remember that.
Remember that, right? And he decided to humble himself and said, you know what? This is true. As much as I don't want to face this about myself, I suck at the game of volleyball. Like, I really don't get it. I just because we see how he got into volleyball in the first place. He just saw a kid jump really high. And he's like, I want to be that kid. I want to be like that too. I want to fly. Right. Which is even like one of the openings is fly, right?
Oh,
Like,
their openings are amazing. They're some of my favorite opening. And I just want to say this before I forget. Haikyuu is a great example of like kind of the shadow being explored because there was a scene. I forgot. It's been a long time since I watched this, so I forgot who the characters were in particular. But I remember there were these two characters that they kind of they were arguing. Um, they were arguing during practice, like at night or something like that, and it was
mhm,
a really heated argument. right? Because they were practicing and they just their team kind of synchronicity wasn't good between the two of them, and they argued and everything they felt about each other came to light. But because that darkness was brought to the light, when they finally got back to playing with each other, they played perfectly together.
Yeah.
They were a perfect pair. I don't know if you know what I'm talking about,
No,
but I
yeah,
forget their names, but yeah, I remember that scene perfectly. And
yeah. I think it even happened between Hinata and Kageyama.
yeah, even yeah, Kageyama too, because
Yeah.
they were very close and they had to train together so many times and kind of yeah, like Haikyuu, like I'm saying, like the whole show is them kind of confronting their own individual shadows and dealing with each other's shadows and the team shadow as a whole.
Mhm.
Is really beautiful to watch. It's really
Yeah.
good. Most sports animes are like that as well. Kuroko no Basket, Kuroko himself, he is
Hajime no,
literally a shadow.
yeah,
Hajime no Ippo.
yeah. No, yeah.
Yeah.
I agree. Like for him, even, but you know what? The epitome of somebody just dealing with their darkness on and on and on is Asian Sawabura from
Oh yeah.
this guy. He when I literally have shit chills right now just talking about it because the amount of hardship and humiliation he's had to endure, where it was easy for him to give in to the darkness and decide, you know what, I just don't care anymore. I'm just no, he kept being his cheerful self while still working on himself to become an asset to his team.
Yeah.
Praiseworthy stuff. Amazing. That's how you deal with your darkness in a productive way while still remaining functional in the way that you normally are. It's to this day, I have a hard time finding an example of a character who's been through as much as he has and over as much as he has, like complete embarrassment and humiliation, where a lot of people would have completely repressed that and decided, you know what, I'm not going to deal with this because it's just not, it doesn't serve me. He used that as a trampoline to propel him, forward.
Yeah. I mean, this is perfect. Look at him here. You see Asian here smiling.
Dude, it's like Google
Then
just knew what to do for us today.
then you see him here pure darkness, right? But then you see him here on the right, and it's almost as if these two aspects
Mix of
got
the two.
blended. That's what you want right there.
That perfect blend right there. That's what you want for
And he
real.
got the S. He got the S tier right there because he's an S tier character, bro. Listen,
Uh,
okay, listen, bro. I'm actually surprised with how far we've been able to go with this topic. This is like insane. Like,
oh yeah, there's just so many instances. That's a beautiful thing about anime and shonen especially, where you're able to find so many instances of characters that have to interact and deal with their shadows, whether it be on a regular basis or in key moments in their growth and their evolution. So
yeah,
it doesn't surprise me. I feel like honestly, because we decided to just tackle that topic as a whole and see how pervasive it is in anime, right? But if you want my personal opinion, we could do a study of a case by case of some of these characters we covered today. They would
yeah,
just properly just dissect them and just everything from their backstory, how it feeds into their shadow, why it is the way that it is, and how to deal with it. There's just so much. There's just so much to go with it.
yeah. I think this is definitely going to be probably the first of maybe many videos that we do regarding the shadow, because it's just such a broad and big topic. And I feel like this was a good blanket video to kind of get into what the idea is.
Yeah,
And but we're definitely going to discuss it more in depth in the future. And I mean, we've already gone so much in depth, but I mean, this is before we go, I just want to kind of bring this up. Just just before we go, Dragon from One Piece. Teddy, how much dog does he have? Where is he on the doggo meter, bro? Is he a 1 or is he a
uh,
10, bro? Where does he fit for you?
well, so
Is
this
this him right here? This is how he
no, that's
looks right here
not,
to you?
that is not no. That's like edge lord type stuff. Oda would never, if you know that, he'll never do this. Um, No, my thing with Dragon is I guess it depends on how you look at him. If you have his pre-timeskip perception, he's got the most vicious dog in him, right? Like I'm talking like a Rottweiler or some real mean and aggressive, right? But if we're talking about what we've been getting from him lately in the story, I don't know, bro. This man has been sweating a lot lately. It concerns me. I feel like he should be more in control of the situation, but he doesn't seem to be. A lot of times when things happen around him and he's just reacting to them or waiting for more information, where I would think as a revolutionary, he'll be a lot more aggressive. I
Yeah.
remember when we got his well, not his flashback, but during Vegapunk's flashback when they went to O'Hara. You remember that dragon? Yeah,
Yeah.
that had all the dogs in him. Like he was fierce. He seemed like he had purpose, and he was very driven. That's the way he felt. I'm not saying he's not driven today. I'm just saying that the way he's been depicted recently, he's got me questioning a few things
Yeah.
about his personality. But I
Yeah, I
guess
feel that.
we'll just wait and see how
Yeah.
it.
Okay. One last question. One last question before we wrap it up. I promise. Okay. Saitama, right?
Mm,
He is OP. He is awesome, right? But do you
abs-
feel like he has a well integrated shadow? Like he's well in tuned with his repressed side, and he has a good control of all aspects of himself.
I think he does. Surprisingly,
Yeah.
I think he's so bored that he does. You've read the recent chapters, right? Like with
Yeah.
Arrow and everything. Do you remember that haunting face he made when he saw Genos completely destroyed?
Yeah.
It was like if you can think of purified rage, that's what that looked like. Where it became just his sole purpose to teach Garo a lesson. He was just standing there in the rain holding Genos' core, and he's like, I can't believe you've done this. And I feel like this is the first time we actually get to see a glimpse of his darkness and
Yeah.
what he's capable of. But what surprised me is that he just went to work, got busy on Garo, and handled him without ever like losing himself in the moment. And to me, that shows a great control over your darkness, over your shadow.
Yeah. He has a great control over that kind of like really serious, basically the serious mode. He has a very good control of that. But you know what? There's an aspect of it that I see, right? Where remember this moment in One Piece where Robin gets taken, a tsunami's coming, Zoro's stuck in a chimney, all the chips are down on the Straw Hats,
Mm.
and Luffy is just fucking around. Like being stuck between two buildings and making like a joke, making a joke out of it. And Nami comes to him and she's like, listen, what the hell are you doing? Robin's about to die right now, and you're just here screwing around. And she starts crying, and then Luffy, like, he turns off his, like, stupid, goofy mode, trying to make light of the moment, and he has to get serious, and he has to get mad, and he has to pull the shadow. He has to get that dog out of him. And I don't know if you read the latest chapters of One Punch. Are you caught up to One Punch Man? Is it okay if
Uh,
I kind
Not
of?
as caught up as can be. I've read the Tatsumaki fight. That's as far
Okay,
as
so you're pretty much caught up. You read the whole
yeah. I'm
Garo
like
fight.
maybe one or two chapters behind right now.
Oh, okay, okay, yeah, me too. So you know what I'm. I think you know what I'm talking about. Where Genos was killed by Garo, right? His heart
Mm.
was ripped out, and Saitama, when he gets there, he has this moment where he's like, "I'm always late. Why am I always late for this
Yeah,
type of thing?" And I
yeah.
feel like while Saitama generally does have a good control of like his dark side, sometimes he can goof off too much and he can kind of slack, or like you said about yourself, right, that you get lazy. And I feel like that he still has to get control of that kind of bored side of himself, because if he doesn't, he may in his boredom, in the lapse between being bored and being serious, he may lose someone again.
Yeah, yeah, that's and you know the funny thing about Saitama's characterization is that it seems like he doesn't have anybody that he considers close. Like he has a bunch of acquaintances. I guess the closest person would be Genos, right? But outside of Genos, he doesn't really care for a lot of people. And I think he's in a place where maybe part of his darkness is that he doesn't want to admit it to himself, but he actually cares for Genos quite a bit.
Yeah,
But like he doesn't want to acknowledge it, so he just goes about it. And I think, because mind you, when he gets there and he has that inner monologue when he's saying, to me, that shows not only the rage aspect of it, also the caring aspect of it. Because I feel that if he had been anybody else, he wouldn't have been so harsh on himself that he was late. But it's because he was generous, right? Because you think about, there's been plenty of other times where he's been late, where uh,
yeah,
there's always been already been a lot of casualties, like during the martial tournament with Shiryu and all the
he
other.
was so late. Yeah,
It was extremely late, like right. But even then, he was like, "I my fault, I was late. I had to go and change." Right? He didn't see it as that big of a deal, but I feel like it wasn't necessarily the fact that he was late. It's the fact that he was late for Genos
yeah,
that really stuck with him. And so it's like a combination of the rage, but also him caring for Genos. That he
mhm.
doesn't necessarily want to acknowledge himself, but it's there. Right. So yeah, I think that was dude, I'm glad you brought that up. That was a key moment in his character, honestly.
Yeah. That was it's just amazing. And listen, we could go on for hours and hours more, but I want to end it here on a really good high note for us. And this was just such a great topic. Thank you, Teddy, for joining me, and thank you to
Every time, you already know.
for sure. Thank you to anybody who's listening, anybody who's watching after the fact. This was a great discussion, kind of on Carl Jung and the shadow and its instances in anime, kind of exploring it in depth and just having a discussion. I mean, these streams are just discussions. They're not.
That's what we're all about. Yeah, like
Yeah,
explore these topics as deeply as we can, always go deep.
yeah. We are by no means textbooks. You know.
No, we're not. But we enjoy delving into those topics, trying to see all the different facets and aspects of them. And yeah, I mean, this was amazing, man. The thing is, I should start expecting it now. You would think after how many years we've had conversations, in-depth conversation with each other, I would know to expect this. But it always catches me off guard when we go deep like that.
Yeah.
But I mean, that's pretty much it for me. One thing I'm gonna say before we go is the last thing for me, because um, we talked about One Punch Man. Now, y'all need to do yourselves a favor and read the manga. I promise you, it's a great time. I
Yeah.
don't know if the anime is ever gonna get to the stuff that we're getting in the manga right now. I mean, it's as fan servicey as it gets if you love shonen. So, but please, by all means, get into it.
Yeah. Get into all of that. Get in that mixed bag because it really is worth it. And I mean, the One Punch Man manga is one of the few instances where the manga is actually just as good as any anime you're gonna
It's
watch.
better, like,
Like it's literally just as good as watching fucking Demon Slayer. Like because the manga is
or you
drawn to such great detail.
you get a better sense. Like, I'm not gonna lie to you. If you look at manga panels from the season 2 adaptation of One Punch Man, the panels convey a sense of motion sometimes better than the actual anime where things are moving. It's
Yeah,
insane. It's
yeah,
ridiculous.
it's
Murata
amazing.
is cracked out. Like, I don't know how he does that.
Yeah, and it's a very easy read. It's very like blockbuster style shonen, like very like popcorn type. It's very easy to get into. There's
It's
not much to think about while you're reading it, but it does have some themes if you are there for that. But it's very much like user friendly. Like I mean, it's just low pretense, not pretentious at all,
no,
just all action and all like fun.
it's just time.
It's just a great time. Yeah.
Yeah.
And yeah, I mean, we're definitely gonna hit this topic again. I want to even get into some more Bleach topics because Bleach is one of the like great examples of shadows. And yeah, I mean, this was great. Thank you guys all for listening. Make sure to leave a like and maybe subscribe, leave a comments. Um, you know, if you agreed or disagreed with anything we
If
said.
anything we said stimulated your mind, by all means, let us know in the comment section. We
Yeah,
appreciate
yeah. Let us know. Let us know. We're always open and available to read your comments. So, yeah, I mean, this is goodbye until next week when we stream about God knows what, maybe nihilism. I know Teddy had an idea about nihilism in
Hey, no
anime.
for the people. Yeah, come on now. We're gonna
Uh,
get to
yeah,
it.
yeah, yeah. Just a little teaser, just a little teaser. You know what I'm saying?
Yeah.
But yeah, that's just something to pique your interest. And with that, we are out. This has been the pursuit of anime with Carl Jung and the shadow in anime. Peace.